Welcome to another episode of It Has to Be Said. I'm Rachel French, and here's what I have to say today. I say it's time to revisit the Julian Assange case and refamiliarize ourselves with it, and also become aware of a secondary case, a civil case that almost no one is talking about. So let's get into it. Now listen, the Julian Assange case is super complicated. I don't pretend to understand all of it. If you go to Wikipedia, which is arguably the most simple explanation you'll get of pretty much anything, it's still going to be really complex and long with a lot of names and dates and places and things that are going to overwhelm you. So I want to give you just the basics, just to refresh your memory, and then we're going to talk about the secondary case, and then we'll sort of explore for a second the significance of the case against Assange and the secondary civil case so we can fully understand the attack on American civil liberties and freedoms directly from our government. This is really important stuff. All right, so Julian Assange, not an American citizen, actually an Australian, who in 2006 started up a website with a few guys, and they called it WikiLeaks. And the point of it was that people could, like whistleblowers, could release documents without even giving their names. They could be anonymous, and stuff could be published for people to see. This was a way to be transparent about things that, well, we have a right to know. All right, from 2006 to 2010, Assange was, I would argue, a controversial yet somewhat benign figure, right? He's this guy that is being a journalist, but not totally a journalist. He's publishing things that other people are bringing to him. So he's any journalistic integrity because according to him and according to the sources, he's not encouraging them to do anything wrong. They may be doing things like breaking laws or doing something unethical to steal or to get information, and then they're bringing it to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks is publishing it. So the WikiLeaks people, they're in the clear. In the United States, you should know this, and I'm sure this is true in a lot of countries. In the United States, if you steal information and you take it to a journalist and you say, hey, will you publish this? As long as the journalist didn't encourage you to do it, they're in the clear. You're the one who's on the hook. So this was the same situation with WikiLeaks for a very long time until 2010 and 2013 and 2016, when the information that was published made the United States government look bad, and then everything changed. So in 2010, what happened was Chelsea Manning, an Army soldier, stole, right? Because she's not supposed to do this. She took a bunch of classified documents and unclassified, but she took a bunch of documents and videos and she made them available to WikiLeaks to publish. And some of the stuff was pretty damning against the United States military and government. For example, a bombing in Baghdad where there were civilian casualties, and same thing in Afghanistan. So this made the U.S. military look bad, and now WikiLeaks is really on the radar. Now, Chelsea Manning was prosecuted under the Espionage Act. Right here, we should pause and talk about the Espionage Act, because this is the same law that's being used against Julian Assange and also against Donald Trump. Now, the Espionage Act of 1917 was written during World War I. The intention was to keep people from doing things that would make us lose the war. So, for example, under the Espionage Act, you're not allowed to interfere with recruitment or operations of the military. You're not allowed to be insubordinate to your leaders, go against orders, and you're not allowed to support your enemies. In other words, you can't do anything to help the enemy defeat us, the United States. That was the intention of the law. Over the last 100 plus years, of course, it has expanded, and now it's being used not only in wartime, but also in times not of war and against people who are not in the military, but basically against anyone that the United States government or the military decides goes against the best interests of the country, which really means against the best interests of the power structure, doesn't it? So Chelsea Manning found herself up against charges under the Espionage Act. Something else you should know is that if you're charged with espionage, you're going to lose. And the reasons you're going to lose are that you can't really make a defense for yourself. And you're talking to the people against whom they say you have committed a crime, and they're the ones deciding whether or not you've committed the crime. So things that you can't do in court as part of your defense. You can't mention the First Amendment and your right to freedom of speech as a defense. That just doesn't play. You can't call yourself a whistleblower. Now, whistleblowers are good. At least here in the United States, we like to think of ourselves as people who like whistleblowers. If you're a corporate whistleblower, that's good. But if you're a government whistleblower, that's bad. But you can't even mention it. You also can't talk about the reasons why you've taken the information and made them available to the public. And you can't talk about classification or overclassification of documents, or claim that documents should have been declassified by now, and that's why you had the right ethically or legally to take the documents and make them public. So anything that a person would do to make a defense against the charges is just not allowed in a court of law. And so you're going to lose. So Chelsea Manning lost, and just as a point of interest, Obama commuted her sentence. But this really put Julian Assange on the radar of the United States government, because the videos especially, and a lot of the other documentation, was pretty embarrassing for the military. There were, these strikes that killed civilians unnecessarily, and that made us look sloppy, and it made us look mean, and it was embarrassing. And now Julian Assange is in trouble. So he's got 1 or 2 counts against him now in 2010. Now in 2010, he is leaving Sweden to go to the UK. And on the day he leaves Sweden and arrives back in the UK, he gets contacted, a call, I assume, from the Swedish government saying, hey, you've been accused of rape by 2 women here, and we need you to come back here and be questioned. Well, he doesn't want to do that. Why would he want to do that? He's now facing, arguably, officially, I don't know, but facing extradition back to the United States. And the question is really, are these accusations real? Are they just intended to smear him and make him look even worse in the court of public opinion, so that when he's found guilty or when he's charged with espionage, the American people and the people of the world will be more likely to say, well, yeah, he's kind of a scumbag anyway? This happens all the time. Our government loves to do this to people. In fact, we've done it to a lot of people connected with WikiLeaks in the past. But that's question number 1, is does he want to go face these accusations? And number 2, is this just a way for the United States to get Assange back? Because if he goes back to Sweden, now he's in the system, and is Sweden going to send him back to the United States? Yes, probably. And if he goes back to the United States, will he have to face charges? Yes. And will he be found guilty? Yes, absolutely. So he's in London, and the UK could have extradited him as well, but we're not to that point yet. So what does Assange do? He goes to the Ecuadorian embassy and he claims asylum, and he asks them if they will give him asylum. And Ecuador says, yes, we will. So in the city of London, Assange goes into the Ecuadorian embassy and he stays there. And when I say he stays there, I mean he stays there because there's no place to go. He can't leave because then he's in the city of London, and then the London authorities will grab him and probably send him back to the United States. So he's in there for years, from 2011 to 2019. He's in the embassy. He's not in prison, but he may as well be. Now, at some point while he's there, I believe 2012, he asks for a women's bathroom to be basically cleared out so he can have a quiet space for himself and also to meet with his attorneys. In 2013, something else happens that makes the U.S. government mad, and that is when Edward Snowden releases a bunch of documents that show proof, indisputable proof in my opinion, and probably in your opinion as well, that the U.S. government has been spying on its citizens without our permission. So huge download of NSA documentation, all of which show that the government has been treating us like the enemy and taking our private information, listening in on our calls, taking our private correspondence, and basically treating us like enemies of the state. This again puts Assange in deeper, hotter water. At this point, the accusation is that Assange is not just publishing things that are embarrassing to the United States, but he is now conspiring with Snowden and had conspired with Manning to get these documents. So again, if you're a journalist and someone brings you stolen documents, you can publish them. But if you conspire with the person who steals or acquires the documents, you're in as much trouble as they are. So now the government is saying Assange didn't just publish things, but he was part of acquiring these things. Well, now he's in really deep doo-doo. Good thing he's been granted asylum and he's hanging out in the Ecuadorian embassy. But for how long? Forever, maybe. In 2016, something else happens that's embarrassing. Not to Assange, but to people in the power structure, part of the machine, part of the blob, part of permanent Washington. And what happens is there's a dump of emails from a bunch of people, including John Podesta, that show that the DNC is favoring Hillary Clinton in the election against Bernie Sanders. Tisk, tisk, tisk. You're not supposed to do that. So again, this is embarrassing to the power structure. The Clintons are very powerful in DC. They are part of the blob. They are part of the machine. And so now Assange is in trouble times 3. Multiple charges are added to the ones that already existed. Now he's up to 18 charges. By the way, you know those charges of rape, those 2 women? Yeah, there were no charges. There were accusations, but he was never actually met with charges. It sort of makes one wonder if they were real or not. Or was it just a strategy to get Assange back into the United States and a way to smear him and make him lose in the court of public opinion? I think it's pretty clear what I think. I think it is all dirty. Definitely all dirty. Well, now 2016 that happens, and now we're up to about 2019. There's been change in Ecuadorian leadership. There's also a tremendous amount of pressure being put on the UK government from the United States, and all things come together, and Ecuador decides that they don't want to grant asylum anymore to Assange, and so they turn him over to the London authorities. It's said that he was actually grabbed by the arms and the legs and pulled out. And from there, he goes to maximum security prison, the Belmarsh prison, where he's been since 2019. He has yet to face accusers. He has yet, well, he knows his charges, but he hasn't been extradited yet. Today is March 10th. And it was on February 21st, just a few days ago, 2 weeks ago, that they finished the last appeals. He's not being granted any more appeals. It is understood that he'll be extradited sometime this spring to the United States to go to trial. This is all very bad news for him because, like I said, he's going to be found guilty because everyone who's charged with espionage is found guilty. And as a United States citizen, I'm happy that we know the things that we know, which we would not have known had he not published things from Manning, things from Snowden. Snowden, who, as you probably know, is in Russia and has been for years. Apparently, Assange and some of his guys helped him get over to Russia. I don't know if that's true or not. I think it's true. But Snowden can never leave Russia because if he does, he's going to be sent back to the United States and he's going to go to prison. So Assange is going to be taking the heat for all of this. And it's not pretty. It's not a good thing at all. He'll die in prison. He's facing 175 years in sentencing. But even if he only gets 30, he's going to die. He's 52 years old and he is not in good health. And one could argue he's not in good health because he's just spent the last 8 plus 5, 13? He's just spent 13 or so years without daylight. It's not a good situation. An interesting side note here, I found an article, and you may already know about this, but I think it's fascinating. So there's a Russian artist, his name is Andrei Molodkin, and what he has done is he's gathered a bunch of artwork, including stuff by Picasso, Rembrandt, and Warhol, but a total of 16 pieces of fine art worth a total of $45 million. And he has put the works of art into a vault, and it's an artistic installation he calls Dead Man's Switch. And what is attached to this vault is a dead man's switch. Every 24 hours, a member of Assange's family or someone close to him has to verify that he's still alive. And if they don't verify that he's still alive, if he dies in prison, the switch will go off. And there's a barrel of acid and a barrel of accelerator, and it will fill the vault, and $45 million worth of fine art will be destroyed. Now, I think it's interesting that Molodkin believes that this won't happen, that the art won't be destroyed. He believes that Assange will not die in prison. I'm of the mind that he probably will, unless Trump is elected and pardons him. He had the chance to pardon him before, and he didn't do it. So I don't really have any faith in him, at least with regards to this topic. But Molodkin's point is that we value fine art more than we value human life. It's taboo, he says, to destroy art, but it's not taboo to destroy a life. It's an interesting little side note, worth looking up, worth watching a little bit of the interview with him, interviews that you can find even on YouTube right now. All right, so that brings us to this secondary case that you probably haven't heard about, but that I think is pretty interesting, especially when looked at in juxtaposition to the case against Assange. While Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy, he had visitors, including his family, doctors, journalists, and attorneys, of course. Remember that he has this women's bathroom that's been cleaned out and it's a quiet space for him. Sometime around 2016 or 2017, microphones were put into that women's bathroom without his knowledge. And that means every time he had a conversation, his conversations were being recorded. So that includes everything that he discussed with his family, with journalists, with physicians, and with his attorneys, including regarding strategy. That is a violation, or would be a violation, of his Fourth Amendment rights, except he's not an American citizen. So too bad, so sad for him. However, it is a violation of the Fourth Amendment rights of any American citizens who went in to discuss legal strategy or private personal medical information with Julian Assange. But that's not the only thing that was happening. Also, when these people would visit the embassy, they would have to leave all of their electronic devices at the door. So guess what was happening to their electronic devices? You guessed it. They were being copied. Everything off laptops, cell phones, everything. And where do you think all of these copied electronic devices and all of these recordings from his private, confidential conversations, where do you think they were going? If you said to Langley, to the CIA, you would be right. Ding, 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 ding. And we know this is true because there are signed affidavits, sworn affidavits from people working in the Ecuadorian embassy who say that they received documents, they needed to do this, and they agreed to do it, and they sent this stuff back to the CIA. Now, a lot of people visited Julian Assange, but the ones who were American citizens have had their Fourth Amendment rights violated by the U.S. government. This is a really big deal. Now, the reason I know about this is because I follow a journalist named Cheryl Atkinson, and I highly advise you look for her. She's got a TV show, and she's got, well, not a TV, not network TV, but you know what I mean. She's got a channel, and she's got a podcast, and she does really good journalism. She was last with, I want to say, CBS, and she asked to be released from her contract because she had done some really great exposés, and they would not run her stories. They were holding her to contract like they do to so many journalists in order to hold on to the stories. I'm kind of surprised that when she asked to be released from the contract, they let her, but they did. And so she's gone on to be able to do the kind of work that she wants to do. She's very impartial and unbiased from what I can tell, but the left mainstream media and the leftist, news outlets, they call her a right-winger, of course, because anything that's middle of the road or fair is right-wing. It's craziness. But she had on her podcast not too long ago a man named Richard Roth. And Richard Roth is the attorney who is working on behalf of his two clients who are United States citizens. And they filed a lawsuit against the CIA because of the violation of their Fourth Amendment rights, and named some people as well. Now, of course, this is not a surprise that the CIA appealed. But while Mike Pompeo was mentioned by name, and he was given immunity and released from the lawsuit, to the court's credit, the CIA is still on the hook. They still have to go ahead and face their accusers. And this is a very good thing. I don't have a lot of hope that it's going to go the way we want it to go. These people should win the lawsuit. The CIA should absolutely be held accountable. The U.S. government as a whole should be held accountable. Individuals by name should be held accountable. But whichever way it goes, one thing that can happen here is that we can be more aware that this is going on. Look at the irony, the juxtaposition of these two cases. What is Assange in trouble for? They say that he stole stuff or conspired to steal stuff, but really what he's in trouble for is making information public to United States citizens and to citizens all over the world. That's what he's guilty of. He's guilty of embarrassing the government, of embarrassing the military. He's in trouble for being a journalist and a publisher. And at the same time that the United States government is upset that this man is making information public, they're taking private information in violation of the rights of U.S. citizens. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife, and it's disgusting as well. We need whistleblowers. How do we decide who to vote for? Who do we decide who to support? How do we decide what to do if we don't have information? We need information. And my position is that we ought to be grateful for whistleblowers, not just at the corporate level, but at the government level. In fact, especially at the government level. It's my opinion that Donald Trump should have pardoned him. That's my opinion. It's my opinion that he shouldn't even have to face charges. He's essentially been held in what is prison for years. He's been in a maximum security prison for 5 years now. And before that was essentially a prisoner in the Ecuadorian embassy. He has not had freedom in his life at all for the last 15 years. He is ill. He will die soon, probably, unless he is released. And it's more than likely that he's not going to be released. He will probably die in prison. We will probably lose $45 million worth of fine art. And my guess is that the mainstream media will make a bigger deal over the loss of that art than they will over the loss of a man's life. I wish Trump would have pardoned Assange. I wish that we lived in a fairer, freer country. I wish that the country were what I thought it was all the years that I was growing up. But especially in light of what's been going on the last 3 or 4 years since the pandemic, since we've become awake and aware, so many of us have become aware of what's been going on behind our backs, not just without our knowledge, but to us as well. Now more than ever, we need to be cognizant of how our rights are being violated on a regular basis and how we are being kept in the dark on purpose by a government that is not benevolent, but that has its own motives. I don't think that the government as a whole works for us. I don't think that there are as many people as I used to think who are good guys that are our elected officials or appointed by our elected officials. I don't think there are as many good guys as I used to think. I used to believe that there were enough good guys who wanted to do the right thing, who really cared about people and didn't want to hurt them, that the government was always kind of kept in its own checks and balances, in that we had the choice to vote and we would swing right and then we would correct and swing left, and that mostly we evened out in the middle. I've lost so much of my faith in individuals, and I have zero faith in the institutions. That is for sure. And so while I don't want to black pill you, I do want you to be aware that this is going on. They hate us, or at least they don't care about us. Just like the strikes in Baghdad that Manning revealed, collateral damage, civilian damage, they didn't care. Your right to privacy, your right to fair trials, your rights are being trampled and you are collateral damage. At least you're collateral damage, and maybe you're even, the worst enemy, like domestic enemy that's ever been, like a MAGA extremist, a domestic extremist. Times are changing, folks, and it's just really important that we be aware of all this. I hope that you found this interesting. I certainly found researching it very interesting, and I'm glad to share it with you. If you liked this and think that someone else might enjoy it, please share it with someone. Also, I want to let you know that you can find me on YouTube and Rumble and Spotify for the video and audio versions of this podcast, but it's really meant to be listened to, and you don't have to watch my beautiful face. There are no graphics or anything. It's just meant to be listened to while you multitask or drive or whatever. So you can also find me on iHeartRadio and where else? And Apple Podcasts. So every time you subscribe or download an episode, you help me get found by my new audience, and I appreciate your support. Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end, and I'll see you next time.